Hmm. Western influences. I think the thing I cite the most when it comes to westerns for air is Trigun. If you've ever seen that anime, it's a very spaghetti western, but with a lot of anime flavor thrown over it.
Sorry, I was adjusting it. Apparently, I've thankfully there are captions because I had the audio off. Apparently,
Oh
uh,
no.
so with sorry, my questions disappeared. So we've talked a lot about like your creative outlets and things like that. Is going to novellas your preferred outlet right now? Is there what are you gonna do for, or what do you plan on doing with all these world creation things that kind of come at you? Because you've already got two projects on your hands. Are we looking at more novellas? Are we looking at any other kinds of media?
Well, every so often I post short stories on Medium, but a lot of the times my writing, even though I can do novellas and I love the novellas I wrote, I'm already adapting them into a visual novel because my writing suits best when it's game writing because a lot of the stuff that I write feels a lot better when you can move around in it. And it's not that it's because I'm super wordy, it's more just like ever since I started writing, which was it's been more than 10 years now because I've been writing since I learned to. It just complements it well because of world building, and the thing that needs world building most are video games. I've always wanted to work in video games. When I was 9, I was like, I wanted to work for Kodami because Silent Hill was one of my favorite games at that age.
So I've also noticed you've mentioned some horror things in the past. Is there going to be any horror elements or spooky elements in Freyr?
So that's a complicated question because yes, but I don't think in the traditional way that most people associate that with, because my favorite game being Silent Hill, it's not, a lot of people consider it horror, but I could probably write an entire essay of why that's not quite the genre it belongs in. But for me, horror is more like the quiet moments where you're alone to think with yourself and you're just exploring something, and just the oppressive nature of the place you're in is what's making you uncomfortable, not something jumping out of the dark or like. So we have a specific dungeon that we are still working on, obviously, but in it's using a lot of the elements from Silent Hill that made Silent Hill spooky in the same like way of like just the natural noises going around and just the music and just exploring on your own and making up your own things in your head instead of doing it for the player.
So on it, I do see where you've talked a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft, rightfully also mentioning that he is an absolute racist. But we've seen a lot of stuff from the Eldritch horrors that he has created come into it. Uh, does that style of deep space oddity does that ever influence any of the horror stuff that you write?
So for me, horror is a little, it's weird for me because I'm adopted. I grew up in like the middle of nowhere, northeast Pennsylvania. So for horror for me isn't like I have a phobia of the dark and stuff, but horror for me is people. It's just your regular human beings. It's like I have existential crisis sort of thoughts and the idea of being alone and stuff. But for me, horror is always more about the interpersonal relationships than like a spooky monster. It's why like one of my favorite shows is The Haunting of Hill House. And it has its scary bits, but the parts that really mess with you is just the human relationships and how easily messed up they are, or how people complicate things.
I can't remember the name of the one he did, but there is an H.P. Lovecraft that doesn't really have anything about eldritch horrors in it. That is honestly, that's 100% what it's like. And one of the newer people to start touching some of the stuff actually did like a rendition of it. And I have to say that those ones that definitely go for more of playing around with the idea of humanity and everything right there. It is one of those things that um, it could definitely be scarier. I wish video games did it more.
I think a lot of the time videos games don't do it, and I'll say it a lot for like any genres. They don't hire writers. Being a game writer is a lot harder because people don't jump to hire writers when it comes to video games unless it's a narrative game like your RPGs, and even then it gets a little weird. But like I think all games, regardless if it's an arcade shooter or a visual novel, should have a writer because that is a really specific skill set and will garner you a lot of interesting tidbits. It's why one of the better Fallouts is Vegas because its writing is super heavy.
What would you say is an influence for you for kind of how you write RPG or where you write games? Is there anything specifically, any medium that kind of has helped you kind of dictate the way that you write?
Honestly, it's mostly like um, when I was younger, I would binge watch anime. I would binge watch movies that I'd never seen. I'd binge watch movies from like the 70s or 60s. Like one of the ones I watched when I was younger was Soylent Green. So my influence for writing comes from everywhere because to be a writer, you should be experiencing everything you can. It shouldn't be focused into one thing. It should just be anything, even if it's something you don't like. Maybe take a little look at it and be like, oh, I can take these bits and leave the rest of it.
Is there anything that you have a hope for from your current development, either Freyr or your visual novels, that's not right there just yet, but that you're really hoping comes to fruition?
Well, okay, I have two answers. I have the honest answer, of course, and the answer that like most people would give. My honest answer is to be able to like make more games, and to make more games, we have to either get it published or be a cult hit or just, you have to have money for that so you can make more of the things that you wish you had had as a kid. My other answer is I just want to be able to make more video games that are the ones that I wanted to see. I want to write stories and I want to tell things that I feel like no one's told yet. Like a lot of like we have so many plans for so many things. Like we have two projects now, but there's like 50 other projects sitting over there on a shelf ready to be taken down at any time.
I know that feeling. I use software Notion to keep all of my ideas in for writing TTRPGs, and I've got probably I think it's close to 30 games in development. Um, yeah, I've got over 30 games in the on hold, in progress, and and just ideas sections. So I definitely know that feeling right.
Yeah. I mean, what helps with that for us specifically is that Frere is part of like, oh, what's a good example of that? Like, there's game series that have like their entire lore written out. So you've got like your Halos with there's like 40 books, and then there's the games, and then there's the comics. And we've written Frere to be able to have that sort of thing where you could have a different story, but it's in the same universe, so you can still use like it's old hit like Freyr, for instance, could be old history in another game of like such and such happened this many years ago, sort of thing. Because it's a lot easier to write a game and write more stuff if you just basically have an entire history written out for it.
So do you have any novellas planned as a pre or post publication for Freyr?
It's definitely a possibility. I would love to do like a graphic novel or something for it, but a lot of my ideas for it would probably be other games.
Are you, is there anything right now kind of planned as a oh my goodness, the word for it just left my brain. A game teaser. What are the demo? Game demo.
So
Sorry,
there
words are leaving my
was
brain.
going to be one, but because of how publishers work and having to, do your decks to them, pitch decks to them and stuff, we haven't gotten to that point yet because we plan on having one, but we have to get to the point where we can even have that in the rear view mirror. And that's not the current case because we've pitched to a couple publishers and they've said no, some of them rightfully because of the pandemic and budgets and stuff.
I will say some of the video footage uh, that's up looks a lot of fun. I mean, you could definitely see uh, the farming influence here. I kind of almost feel like the dock scene almost looks, or I guess it's a dock, almost makes me think like Pokemon for a second for some reason. I don't know why that's the first thing that comes to mind, but I definitely like the little explosive scene that happens in that. And it looks like the character does a little roll.
Yeah.
Is that something that the player can activate, or is that more, or right
If you're
now
talking
is
about the main player character, yeah, there's a dodge because some of the combat's influenced by like a lot of your old school stuff, but we want to make it more like fast and dynamic because even if it's a pixel art game, making the combat super fun was a really big want.
it looks like I don't know if this is like a, sorry, I'm dropping computer peripherals. It looks very much like an action RPG type of combat interaction in that scene. Is that the goal for the combat is to be more just
Yeah,
right there rather than going to a turn based situation?
definitely, especially for this game specifically, because like there's games in the wings that I want to make that do have turn-based combat, especially after seeing the gameplay footage for Yakuza Like a Dragon. It is very clear you can do turn-based combat that is fun. You just have to put in the work for it.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, with the dodge mechanic, that looks like it was a lot of fun to kind of be. Um, I do have to say, I can't think of a game off the top of my head, but something that I did have seen that's really interesting is that it looks like the scenery is dynamic. It's not static. I mean, it looks like those are reeds waving. It looks like the leaves in the trees are waving. I mean, besides that being taxing on you, like is that going to be the goal for all of the environments, is to have to where they're like that, where you can see them interacting?
As much as possible. Because what we wanted the most was for, even though it's pixel art, for it to feel just as interactive as like you would with what you get out of 3D. So like one of the things I had asked early on and that we had worked on was like, I love when the snow is dynamic and it leaves like trails. So that's something that's not working quite yet, but it's there and it's, you can leave trails. We just have to get it to work with like elevation and those other things too.
Um, so is this going to be? Is there anything planned currently? And I know that in production it's difficult to say, but I do like what I've seen with the lighting effects. Is there anything that's going to be planned where like you have to interact with the scene at night or during the day to get like a certain type of effect?
It really depends because we treat each area like there's 3 or 4 areas total we'll probably have as its own separate puzzle and map. So like it will be the puzzles and map of the areas will be influenced by what we want to tell with the story and what we want the player to do, rather than it just being there to necessarily just be cool because we want things to interact with each other appropriately. So you might get some cool stuff like that where you have to do something at night versus the day, but it really depends on how it influence if the player will even think to do that sort of thing.
And you mentioned dating sims. Is there gonna is it like a heart system? Is it going to be something where you have to get like specific things to influence somebody, or
So funny you should mention that. One of the biggest influences for this when it comes to the dating is how much I disliked it in Stardew Valley, of where you're giving people things, but it doesn't. They're cardboard cutouts, is my less than nice way to put it. And for me, being a writer, I was like, no, every character has their sexuality or has their viewpoints on the world, and not all of them are going to like the character that you chose because they are their own person. So you'll have one of the characters we've shown off in footage and you've seen images of is Go, who is bisexual, and so you'll get some interactions with him from like the male and female character, but he's more like friends with the non-binary character because the non-binary character is also in the asexual spectrum, so you're not going to necessarily have the same interactions you would as the other two.
is the current plan just for the three characters, or is there a chance it's going to be expanded before publication?
Oh no, I would stick with the three specifically because each one of them have a little bit different ways they interact with stuff. And if we were to add any more than that, that's another 50,000 words I have to write where it won't be as strong. Like, one of my big gripes with RPGs is multiple endings and having too many characters because each character you add takes away from the rest of them. And as a writer, you have to learn to cut away things that are going to take away from the story you want to tell.
Are there any current plans? Because I haven't seen any pictures of it, um, for like NPCs that follow you.
There is. We don't have video for it, but one of the first mission you really get, I struggle to call it a mission, but it's more of a way to get the player to point A and B, is you're escorting someone across the main desert map. And so that you get, but it's not like a real escort mission you see in most video games because you don't have to worry about them dying or anything because you will just have to focus on getting across the map, but they do follow you. And we do have plans for some of the romanceable characters to be able to follow you and they'll talk to you and comment on stuff. A game that influenced that was Dragon Age, because Dragon Age, sometimes your characters will just full stop while you're walking and start talking to each other, and I really enjoy that.
I definitely agree. I always thought that I would have loved to see that more from Dragon Age, definitely, and more from other games as well with that type of mechanic. I'm actually very excited to see that come to fruition. Um,
You have that with the it's the non-interactable NPCs, but it's diegetic dialogue. It's in one of the videos where you're walking by and the villagers are talking to each other, but they're not talking to you. They're just talking amongst themselves, and you can kind of just walk a little slower to see the speech bubbles pop up and see what they're going on about.
I do like the idea of that only because I hate it when games try to put like as much of the dialogue like right there, or you have to go up and interact with somebody specifically. Versus if you're walking by, why can't I just see the one liner that they're going to say if I have to go click on them, rather than you know having to actually
Yeah.
go click on each person. So I definitely have to say that's definitely something that's neat. I'm excited for that. Sorry, my throat is a little bit drier than I was expecting today.
We just bought a humidifier because it was getting rough.
Well, it's weird because this corner, like, there's a lot of things over here that, like, this. I actually need a dehumidifier for this corner, but I injured myself yesterday, so I've probably just not been hydrating correctly. Is what's probably happening right now. Remember, kids, if you're out sick or injured, hydration.
Drink your water.
Drink it. So, for your visual novel, is there any previews of that up anywhere? Did I
Not
miss
yet,
it? Okay.
because we're currently we're my fiance is home brewing a tool that is basically Ren'P but for Game Maker. So that will also be open source once that's finished. But we're making a tool that people can make visual novels in Game Maker much easier, because Game Maker has this thing where if you want to do cutscenes and stuff, that it's not super user friendly, especially for someone like me who I did a visual novel once using Ren'P, and trying to do the same thing I did there as I did in Game Maker are wholly different things.
So only because I've dabbled in programming and video game making a little bit, nothing that will ever see the light of day. Um, was there what? Why Game Maker versus RPG Maker or one of the other softwares out there?
RPG Maker is great, but so because my fiance is a programmer and can do all that, Game Maker is great because he can just slap whatever he wants into it. Unity Game Maker is also the most friendly for like pixel art games, specifically like your 2D 3/4 stuff. Like if we were to do a 3D game, we would have to change engines, obviously.
That and I think that honestly, it's marketplace and tutorials that are easily available are probably also a much bigger draw because as many years as I have dealt with RPG Maker, I usually rely on other people's resources for the little stuff that I make. Be but I'm also a one person deal, and none of those are ever
I
going to
have
see the
no
light of
idea
day.
how my teenage self managed to figure out RPG Maker. When I think about it, because I haven't opened that in a really long time, and when I think back to like how I used to be able to do certain things, I'm like, where did you learn this without all the information?
I don't know which one you started on, but I actually did the one that was on the PlayStation that required a separate PlayStation memory card. That was my first one. I actually had a working
Whoa.
game that I would take to my friends on a memory card. And I finally got to the point where I finally copied it, and I have no clue whatever happened to that. But it was probably about a good 30 hours of game. Horrible script.
Wow.
Horrible script. Um, like I look back on it, and I last time that I saw it was probably about 10 years ago. And when I was reading the dialogue, I was like, I don't understand why I would think this is a good idea. So
Oh, don't worry. I've burned the memory of my fan fictions out of my head, so I don't have to think about them.
So we can't expect a visual novel of your fan fictions then?
I mean, I'd get sued because they're all copyright infringement.
I mean, you can always do what they did with what was that?
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey. Just change just enough so that it's no
So it
longer
just
Twilight.
skirts the edge. But like, I make fun of it. But like, I've been writing so long. I used to do, your old Envision board, RPG boards, fan fiction, and all of that. So I've been writing for so long.
Is there at any point that you plan to go from PC to console with Freyr, or is it just a PC version?
Oh, if we could, I would adore to having it on Switch. I specifically was like, if we could get it on a console, I'd love it on Switch because it's so indicative of like the Game Boy Advance games, and a lot of the games that have influenced ours were Game Boy Advance games. So having it on the Switch would be really cool.
I don't know about Game Maker. I know there are other softwares out there that it's just a license and it will port it out for you. So I don't know how much that would be or what that would even take for that. But I would definitely be interested in a console version of this. If y'all ever do PlayStation 4, I know that it's a generation behind. Cough, cough.
Backwards compatibility is for losers, apparently.
um, well, for some reason, every time I talk to somebody lately, they're like, "Yeah, we're planning on going PS5," and I'm not an Xbox person, so I don't know what the next Xbox is. And I'm like, "Cool." So like last gen, like PS4, or like no.
See, I made a joke a while back. I was like, can we get this working on Windows XP?
I I I actually did. I was talking with another indie video game developer not too long ago, and I had posted up recently that I found my Windows XP disk, and they they asked if I would be willing to boot it up on a computer and try their demo game. And I was like, oh, if I had an actual working separate computer, I would do that in a heartbeat.
I have, even though it's really hard and it's not feasible for the most part, I want any game we make to be able to be played on a toaster, even though it's not feasible all the time because certain things that you use are just not going to be playable on older computers. But I'm like, I want any game I make to be able to be played by anybody. I have feelings about games that are pushing the new hardware that have to work on the new hardware because as a kid who grew up with hand-me-downs and not being able to afford that kind of thing, it's like you're limiting your audience because there's people who can't afford that.
I just took a old. Well, I'm still in the process of doing it. But I have a Dell computer. It's an old enough model where the RAM in it is DDR3. It's not even the current DDR4 style RAM. And I am turning it into two computers because I had two CPUs. So I bought two newer motherboards that can handle more RAM. They're both going to have 32 gigabytes, the maximum RAM that you can get for these DDR3 boards. Um, and I got, I don't remember what these graphics cards are, but my wife describes them as being something out of Mass Effect, which makes her very excited. Um,
Oh,
she also has like I don't know how many RGB devices on her computer because I was like, I mean, it's the same price as the non-RGB. You want it? Yeah. So like she has this like glowing computer, and my new case is like literally just a black piece of plastic. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not here
I
for
haven't owned a
the.
desktop in so long.
It's and I mean it. But I mean, to the point, like our computers are going to be a little bit nicer with the graphics cards in them. But I mean, they're not brand new. I don't know that I've actually played a brand new video game and I don't know how long. I am very much a bigger fan of grabbing indie games, and the sad thing is when something that is pixelated or like the graphics just don't seem like they're like not that they aren't great looking, but they're not like high end 3D graphics. Why can't I run it on a older computer? That's one thing that does kind of get me about some of these indie games. I don't understand why the push for just making it so that it works on newer hardware.
Some of it is not their fault. Some of it's I own this high tech computer already. I'm making the game on it, so I'm not testing for computers that are lower grade than the one I'm working on. And the reverse also happens.
Oh, absolutely. I will say when it is people that are saying that I did see somebody who was saying that they should have tested it on their other computer, and I'm like, why not? It was already there. Please, please. Um, but it is a funny thing that you say toaster because that's what I hear a lot when we are talking about things behind the scenes. Um, can I stream from a toaster with this? Can I run this on the toaster? That's also what I called this PC before I actually got new fans for it because it was somehow not overheating, but it was a hot mess. Um, so with Freyr being kind of like the mainstay thing, I see that it says that it has been in heavy production since May 2019. With such a small team, do you have any idea of like what y'all are looking at date wise for anything more playable?
At this point, no, because we've had to step back from it, which is why we're doing a second project, because with the publishers and all of that. And we're still working on it tangentially because the tool we're making for the other project ties right back into Frere because it will use it to continue making our cutscenes of like talking to characters and stuff because it's basically the same thing. So it still ties into it, but we've definitely taken a step back because it's a huge project, and we have to have a publisher in order to really make it what we want it to be.
Has there been any discussion or thought about just kickstarting it or
We've
crowdfunding
talked
it?
about it, but the one problem with Kickstarter is it's the same as having a publisher, only you're at the mercy of many people. And like we could manage it, but the amount of money we need from a Kickstarter would we would have to have the same luck as Undertale did for it to be feasible.
I mean, I was still amazed at the Kickstarter that I backed. I can't even remember the name of it now. It is also a pixel game, and they raised quite a lot of money, and the projected date is 2023 right now. So, um, I am excited and scared for, and I backed it last year. So I am excited and scared for that end result. Sorry, I
But
had
we're sure we'll eventually find a publisher. It's knocking at 20 doors and it's going to be the 30th one that says yes.
So right now, all that it's waiting for is a publisher and some software to be made, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and then we'll be able to get back to work on it fully. Like our original projected was like 2022, 2023, but like because of the pandemic didn't help, finding a publisher, then having the money to keep funding making the game, it's hard to tell when it will even have a date another date at this point. We're actually kind of hoping our second project, which we will be publishing ourselves, helps fund Frere while we continue to look for a publisher.
So when your visual novels come out, are those going to be just computer based right now? Is that what the thought is, or?
Well, I mean, again, I would be stoked to have anything I make on multiple things. It's just, the money and the work that has to go into being able to port those sorts of things.
Any last final wrap up thoughts?
Not thoughts. I do have a link I'll send you on Twitter that you can share with people. That's something I'm still really proud of. Any like last minute questions that you've been wanting to ask indie devs that you would want to ask or anything?
Um, Not exactly. I kind of sort of already alluded to it. All indie devs, if you're watching this, please, please, please take design notes and things and make a non-system specific TTRPG game book or just an art book with all the stuff. I used to love when video games had official like walkthrough guides. I could use those as campaign settings. I'd like to see like these awesome indie settings and things like that be able to be ported over to tabletop.
That would be a 100% thing we would do. Like I even brought it up before that, hey, can we write a campaign using our lore? Like it's definitely something we would 100% do.
All right, it has been absolutely amazing. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will definitely try and actually grab you again when it looks like there is more on Freyr to try and get an update at some later point.
Absolutely. People can. I don't update it with Frere news right now, but if people want to like follow my Patreon and stuff, I update stuff about the visual novel and everything instead right now.
So the Twitter handle is NoHumanza, as you see right under their window. But you can also go over to at Frere underscore indie, or at underscore E underscore H underscore S, and get further information on all of that with links to websites. And I will also post up the link that was sent over to me, and y'all could take a look at that. And until the dice roll again.
All right.